And welcome back to our candidates video sit-downs. Diedrich Allen off camera. On camera, Douglas Milholland. Now he is running for 6th District U.S. Representative, the seat that is currently held by Derek Kilmer. You are running as a Green Party candidate. So first, Doug, take a few moments to briefly tell us about yourself, your background, why you are running, and why you feel you're the best candidate for this position.
Diedrich, it's a pleasure to be interviewed. I hope this interview goes out and touches lots of people in the 6th. I'm a retired general contractor living in Port Townsend, Washington. My kids are grown up. My wife and I have a pretty nice life. But I realize that the time that we're in requires something of us citizens besides kicking back and enjoying the kids' activities. I'm a peace activist by vocation and a carpenter by economic necessity. I've worked on struggling with the United States government and the U.S. Navy about reducing the impact of toxic weapons on the lives of our soldiers and on the lives of where the weapons are used. Depleted uranium was a big issue in my life, and we took that issue to the Supreme Court and trying to find a path where when people go home from the war, we don't leave it such a toxic mess. This time is going to determine what the future is like. And if you choose to vote for me, a Green Party candidate, you'll be making a different choice than you typically would consider. So listen carefully. I'm 65. I deeply care about the world that our actions are leaving for our descendants, and I'll do the very best I can to be a servant of the better angels of our nature. So maybe that's enough about me, Diedrich.
Okay. What is your position on immigration reform?
Well, I know a lot of Mexican people. I sometimes go to Mexico, Oaxaca, and I've found a number of Mexicans that have been to the States and have decided they'd rather live in their own home country. The stories they tell about coming up here vary from cruel abuse to, boy, was it great. The main reason they're coming up here is there's a huge wage differential between Mexico and the United States. It's partly due to the free trade agreement called NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. That agreement was supposedly going to be a job creator in the United States. Wasn't true. It was going to benefit the people of Mexico. Didn't happen. What it did happen, though, was that their agricultural production was crushed by the less expensive crops coming out of the north. And that's one of the big issues of why there are so many people that want to come up here. Another issue for immigration has to do with the wars that were fought in Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. A lot of people who are little kids, less than 18 years old, who are on the way up here, are coming out of an economy that was badly shattered by those wars. It's not just about, oh my gosh, we got better opportunities there. It's also about dealing with an economy where 89% of the people in Guatemala are in poverty. It's a tough situation. Cut to the chase here, Doug. What I'd like to say is these are people. We've got to treat them courteously and fairly. And we've got to help their economies get back together if we want to stop the tidal wave of people that want to come here trying to find a future. As your congressman, I would work hard to address this very complicated issue with the listening skills that I have and the ability to bring ideas together, cut the bullshit and the shouting and the acting, and get down to how we are really meeting our core goals of we're Americans, we believe in decency and fair play, and that's the path we're going to find to get through this immigration thing. It will require revisiting some of these free trade agreements, but perhaps we can talk about that later in the interview.
What can be done about ocean acidification and its impact on the shellfish industry?
Well, I was talking with Phil Johnson, the county commissioner in Port Townsend this morning about that, and he described meeting with a scientist. Phil said, if we stopped putting carbon in the air today, I mean as a whole race of people, the human beings, how long would it take for the climate to right itself? And he was told about 300 years. We've got a big problem on our hands, people. It's not going to go away very quickly, and it's not going to be painless. Washington State's in a very interesting position. Many of us are dependent upon the value of the food that comes from the ocean. But if we're taking out the bottom of the food chain because they can no longer create calcium-rich shells, the whole chain of life that depends on that food is going to be at risk. One of the things we can do, some of my friends are trying, is question the wisdom of sending so much coal to China. Sure, it's a sale, and we need sales. America is all about enterprise. But at the same time, it's a small planet. We have to find a path where we don't continue to increase the speed where we're going to systemic crises like ocean acidification. One of the things that's possible locally in the state is we can push the Canadians to put sewer plants on their big cities. That sewage that goes into the Salish Sea, as it's called now, is a part of the eutrophication process that causes ocean acidity. Dealing with non-point pollution issues like large areas of farmland that drain into the salt water is an issue. Most likely, some of you have had a chance to upgrade your septic system, which is another way to reduce ocean acidification. As your congressman, I would push hard to save you money in terms of spending fossil fuels at your own home. If your home was better insulated, it had solar panels or solar hot water systems, which are jobs for people, it would also reduce our carbon footprint, how much carbon we burn every year as individual Americans. So the big picture is sort of bleak. It requires a sea change of where we get energy on the planet. And the small picture in Washington State is that Washington State has gotten more grants from the federal government to study ocean acidification than any place else. And the science is indicating there are things we can do locally. So, as your congressman, I would see if we can go from study to act. And my goal would be to do what I can to save the industry that I was once a part of. I was a commercial diver, harvested gooey ducks and inner sound. I know what it's like to be a harvester and to depend upon that income. So I take a personal interest in this, and I would do what I can to move, as I said, from thinking about and studying to let's get some real work done. Because the time to act is now. 10 years from now, if we do nothing, it will only be worse.
Okay, Doug, where do you stand on stricter regulations for firearms?
Well, I live in Port Townsend, Washington, and my dad had a hunting rifle. I grew up with guns in the house that we sometimes got venison with, or went out and shot birds on the lakes. But it's not the same thing as the gun situation that you see in big cities where people can come into a gun store and buy semi-automatic equipment that's legal now and stuff that can shoot 100 rounds in 10 seconds. Those things aren't for shooting deer. They're for shooting people. And I think that 80% of the people that are in the National Rifle Association agree with me when I say that some guns need to be kept off the market, that it's reasonable to have background checks on all gun purchases. As a congressman, I would close the door on unregulated gun purchases through private clubs and internet. I think everyone who has a gun should be checked to see if they're a bull goose loony or if they're just simply enjoying a reasonable sport without putting lots of people at work. Regulation is something that the federal government, the Supreme Court said was definitely a right of the people. So, do you have a right to own a gun? Absolutely. Do we, the people, have a right to regulate what kind of guns are available and ask that people that have issues around owning guns be said, no, I'm sorry, but you can't have one? I think that's reasonable. My approach is that way.
What do you think the size and duties of the U.S. military should be?
Well, I think we've been sold a bill of goods as a people regarding having a military that is suitable for an empire. If we are the empire of the United States, and we all are now second-class citizens of the United Corporate States, that's a very different reality than the one I would prefer to be a part of. I would prefer that the United States military be downsized. I think a 50% reduction makes perfect sense. I know the Secretary of Defense is talking about a 20% cut. And they're looking at very specific pieces of military hardware that they would prefer not to buy. It's an important issue in this district. There are thousands of jobs in the 6th Congressional District relating to military spending. And quite frankly, I would like to review those jobs and see if we really need to spend that money on into the future. I talked with the machinists down in Bremerton, and they gave me hope that I could speak straight to you about the need to reconsider where some of these jobs are coming from. As you know, military jobs you don't get as much bang for the buck on a military job as you would putting jobs in front of teachers or park rangers or policemen. If we use the money in a different way, we'll have a better shot at having a good economy. The specifics of how we cut and how we can do so safely are big issues. And I'm hoping to be able to discuss that at some length in the general election with the incumbent Derek Kilmer.
Are you in favor of increasing the minimum wage? If so, how would you propose to go about raising that wage to lessen the impact on small businesses?
Well, small businesses have a beef around minimum wages, I'll give you that. But quite frankly, most of the minimum wage jobs are in large corporations. And those people can afford to pay a better wage. It's sort of ridiculous to work at Walmart full-time and still qualify for food stamps, don't you think? They should pay better wages. And in terms of where you put money, if you put money in a poor man's pocket, it's on the street the next day. He has to pay rent, he's got to buy food. There is no savings account being generated by a minimum wage. It's a direct benefit to the economy as a whole. I think that raising the minimum wage is a great idea, and it's got to be carefully thought of for small towns like Shelton, but for the Walmart employees and the McDonald's employees, I think a minimum wage increase could happen today.
How do you plan to represent all areas of your district, especially the smaller, less populated areas?
I think the best answer is active listening. If I find myself your employee, my job is to go to the county commissioners in every county and sit down with them and do what I call active listening. I was talking with Commissioner Johnson this morning, and what he was talking about was federal programs that show up without funding. That doesn't work very well. Or not knowing when it's budget time whether you're going to get money from the federal government or not. He says that we really need to earmark appropriations in a timely fashion so we can do proper budgetary planning. Quite frankly, Dietrich, I didn't have a chance to fully explore this issue with the people that are running federal programs in Jefferson County, but I'm very happy to do so. I really think that it's true that most of the money goes into the cities, but the counties and the rural districts of this state They need federal support for roads and transportation, for job training, and something like an American Peace Corps that would help young people have an experience of what it's like to work for a living rather than sit around. My guess is that we can find a path that will help districts like this that depend upon primary resource extraction and production of shellfish. The federal aid that can come can strengthen this economy, but it really does require that you elect a congressman that's eager to sit down and figure out what our common agenda must be, and I promise to do that.
All right, Douglas Milholland, candidate, a Green Party candidate for 6th District U.S. Representative. Thank you for taking some time.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.